Final day of the first round robin, final match of the first round robin. Welcome in, Nymera. Nice to have you back. How have you been?
Well, I've been great in some ways, pretty frustrated in others, because I would have loved to be here in the heat, in the action, casting more LJL action, but Berlin has done great and terrible things to my internet, but made it in just in time for the end of the first round robin, of course, first of three, and while this game might not be the most prestigious, it's just great to be back and in the LJL atmosphere. I'm enjoying it a lot.
Yeah, and you say not prestigious, but I will say there has been some changes. I think if this was the last split, we would be a bit more like, oh no, this game is going to be a bit rough. But I will say the Hawks performing much better. They were predicted fourth by you guys on the podcast. They are actually finding
Get that one in there early.
Expectations. they are finally meeting those expectations, and it does feel like they actually could get fourth. They've beaten teams like Burning Core, CGA, Axis. They are winning against all the teams we would expect them to. They have lost to Russell Jesters, DFM and Sengoku, which obviously then lands them exactly where you guys have predicted. Obviously, if they can pick up the win over V3, then they are meeting what you expected. Do you feel like there was changes, or it was just that the team was able to gel a little bit longer and therefore worked their magic?
So, I mean, I think the problem with the Hawks is that when you give them expectations, they've pretty much universally managed to fail them. We think about 2020, they came into the league, slated as a top 3 team, they came last. In summer, they managed to barely improve on that. They've managed to just get into that first round of playoffs a couple of times, but never push beyond that. Now, when you have a player like Blank coming into your team, we saw how he revolutionized Sengoku back in 2020 and 2019 when he actually entered that team, but particularly the glory year of 2020 was where things really shined for them. He's come into the Hawks now, and we knew there might be a couple of teething issues getting him on the same page as the rest of the team, and that has been the story of the Hawks this year. I think we're starting to see that glow up, though, as the team starts to mesh.
Yeah, with the glow up, we're going to see what we've predicted for today. And Cash, we're going to be coming to you because one
Oh my
is
God.
unlike the other, and I love that. I love the hopium, the copium coming through there from the Pepe. Yeah, Cash, do you want to talk us through why you picked V3?
Mostly because there just have been those few games where Hawks haven't quite touched ground, and I mean, I found a new stash of V3 Copium, and Nightmare has a horrified link, that's great. Basically, I think there is like a 1 in 50 chance that V3 are gonna throw a massive curveball and Hawks will not know how to deal with it. And honestly, I take those odds. It's been far too long. V3, just please win a goddamn game.
Okay,
So you're predicting a 1 in 50.
Correct.
Tip to the viewers, don't go to Vegas with Kashka. That is basically the tip that we're getting today. Essentially, yeah, you never know. V3 could pull off a win. Obviously, no one expected them to make it close against CGA, but they did that. We did expect them to be close against Axis, and that also did come through. But they haven't really performed since day 3, to be fair. There are a few reasons maybe why we could say as to what it is, but let's move on to the Hawks. Let's move on to the Hawks, and let's kind of talk about where they have maybe looked not as strong was their bot lane. Obviously, Marbles had a lot of scrutiny around the league. They played a lot of Senna Tam Kench. Could this maybe be something they switch up to maybe improve their bot lane?
I actually think this is so. What this is a bit of a band-aid. It's a papering over some of the cracks which the Hawks might have in playing through their bot lane. Because what Senator Tom Kench does is basically says you got to throw a lot at this bot lane to try and make it work. You got to make sure to try and break it, rather, right? It's a rock, but it's not unbreakable. But if you don't put enough down towards that bot side, you can put resources towards top side, and that allows a player like Kinatsu, who has been a big carry player, playing Gnar, playing Kale, getting resources to try and be the real kind of engine room for this outside of that mid jungle, which is where the real initiation plays go. The role of Senator Tom Kench is very easy to play through. It's very easy to identify what it does, and I think that makes it easier for this bot lane, which has been struggling to succeed for now. Maybe later, when they're looking to push maybe beyond fourth, if they do try and look towards that, maybe that's when it needs to change, because Senator Tom Kench doesn't really have another lane like it which can replace it.
Yeah, talking about another lane like it, we've kind of talked a little bit about it in the last game day about kind of what else could be put with Senna. Kashka, is there anything that you'd maybe want to see join the Rift with that Senna bot lane?
That's a tough one. Well, I mean, usually tanks with Senna is what was the flavor last time round that we have seen it, but I feel like Tamkinch is just in such a good spot that not really. We have seen the Ashe Seraphine. That is another bot lane which, maybe has another like utility role that can match it, but something that particularly with Senna, I can't think of a champion right now.
Yeah, and I know Nomura also talked about Swain one time. I don't know if you tweeted it or if you said it.
Oh yeah,
But
there are a couple of things about that because that's the issue with something like a Senna. When you lock in a Senna, you can go towards Senna Tahm Kench, but there is an absolute depth of champions which you can pair that champion up with. We have seen Senna Swain, Senna Soraka, Senna Yasuo. The fact of Senna Tahm Kench performs this very safe role doesn't mean it's the end of what you can do with Senna.
yeah, we'll have to see if that one does switch up. Obviously, talking about some other picks that we could look into. V3 Jungle, they have been really, really spamming Viego. Is it time to switch from the Viego to something else?
Yes, please do. I mean, Unica has been finding some early ganks, but it really feels like his effectiveness after 15 minutes just falls off a cliff. Anything that, retains the kind of engaged potential later in the game and doesn't just immediately die feels more useful. Things like Volibear, maybe even Zac that we've been seeing pop up in LJL recently. I would love to see Unica on those. We have seen one game of Lee Sin that was admittedly against Sengoku. Not great. But maybe if against a team like Hawks it will be slightly better. But yeah, I don't want to see the VA go.
So, funnily enough, so when I was on the NLC the other day, one of the players picked up the Viego, and we similarly questioned that pick because, well, it's had a lot of nerfs at this point, and while the champion is pretty much doing what he's always done, you start to wonder when are the better picks out there. But the player on the interview at that point was saying, actually, Viego's still not really changed that much. We're very practiced with this champion. That obviously can help a lot of things over. So, potentially, I think that Viego is still around the wheelhouse. It's just whether they've had enough practice on other picks which can get you to the same level that Viego now.
Yeah, and obviously there's a pretty tough competition in this one. You're having to play against Blank, who has looked really good in some recent games, especially on things like the Poppy as well. So that could potentially limit some of the options. Things like Wukong not going to necessarily be as strong into that. So it definitely is going to be a game of kind of what should we pick up in draft. As we always say, V3 still haven't really found what their kind of like synergies, what the classic V3 style of play is, which is definitely starting to let them down. But obviously the Hawks coming through pretty strong with their solo laners. Kashka, we are going to be going into draft right now for the last game of the first round robin. Kashka, Namera, take it away.
Alright, there we go. Let's see what V3 have prepared for us. They will be taking the blue side and the Hawks on the red side. Azir, Seraphine, the first two bans to start us off.
So, of course, we are on patch 12.12. Seraphine got a lot of buffs and is kind of returning back to Sarah Queen status. You can play it in bot lane, you can play it in both the carry and the support role down in that lane. It's just become a bit of a pain to deal with. And, of course, there are a lot of other enchanters, which are very, very strong. We're yet to really see any kind of Yuumi look-ins in the LGL. I know that, obviously, in Europe, there are a lot of Yuumi picks. Not really made its way over here. It's been very interesting for me kind of looking into the LGL and seeing what the difference in priorities are between this region, the LEC, the LCK, and the LPL.
Yeah, Tahm Kench is of course going to be taken away from that duo that we have talked so much on the desk. Not going to see it this time around though.
Yeah, so, I mean, Lucian Nami is one of the remaining kill lanes in bot side. With the durability patch, it is harder to play around kill lanes, especially very early into the game. And you've probably seen enough of Lucian Nami now to know what that does. Now, I'm looking at the remaining picks and I'm thinking, well, okay, what have you got left here? Of course, the Tahm Kench has been banned away, so the Hawks will have to go back towards another bot lane. They have played half of the game so far on the Senna Tahm Kench, but with so many bot lane picks now banned out, assuming that the Seraphine is also kind of targeted towards that lane too, it's starting to open up the pool a little bit more. Obviously, something that we have seen a bit around has been something like the Kai'Sa, seen a bit of Kai'Sa Nautilus, seen a bit of Ezreal Karma. Question is, though, what are you going to go towards? And V3 going towards an early game pick, which is the area of the game which we have had the most praise for this team. And the Kallista's locked in. That is another kill lane which we've had left on the table. And I'm wondering, now if you want to take away the Renata from Kallista, Kallista Renata has been the pairing of choice.
Well, so far, Hawks hovering their ADC. It's interesting what type of lane you're going to play into that. I mean, presumably something safe that just wants to sit back and scale, and Aphelios kind of does fit that image. And yeah, Renata here, you could as well just pick it up, especially that with Kallista, you're going to be running at Hawks, most likely.
Yeah, so the thing about the Renata now is that it doesn't pair up especially well with Aphelios. It's okay, but I'm wondering whether you want to go towards something more like a Lulu. Either way, there are champions that you can very much pick up at this point, and there are other blind pickable power picks left. Blank has been very successful on the Wukong. It's been given, it gives him the ability to be the go button for the team in the way which he very much likes to. I think of his Lee Sin, I think of his Hecarim for when he's done very well in the LJL specifically. Of course, when he's been over in Korea, he's had a very different set of champions there too. Of course, a very storied player in general. But now having Blank onto that champion, maybe you're starting to look towards Dasher to go back towards that Lissandra, which has, of course, been very successful. And we get an Amumu support, of course, coming over from LPL.
Okay then, Kalista, Mumu, that's a kill lane and a half. I believe we have seen Hart play that.
Yes, we have, just the once.
Day. Yep. So not entirely new to the LJL and Lee Sin for Unica. Alright, I mean V3, I feel like they just laid their cards open on the table right now.
Oh gosh, so what does this mean? So you do have very strong level 1 from this bot lane. Of course, when you level up the Q as a Mumu, you get 2 charges of the Bandage Toss, which means that you get the ability to have double CC very early on. Kalista loves playing around that. Now with the Lee Sin, that allows you to go towards bot side early, around level 3. You can start potentially going towards level level 3, 3v3 bot sides. With the Wukong, you are strong at that level, but when you don't have the same 2v2 to play around, even with an Aphelios, to really help with that. So V3, for me, it looks like they have a very strong bot side of the map right now, even though Lee Sin is typically a mid-jungle 2v2 champion.
Absolutely, and I would love to see them maybe get rid of some of the supports that might make the level 1 difficult here for them. Hawks on the other side, Galio is the first ban. They could also just try and make sure that Kanatsu gets the best possible matchup in the top lane.
And of course, Kanatsu has been someone who has often picked towards carries, picked towards those good 1v1s and top side, particularly this split. Even when he came in last year, reminder that both Kanatsu and Aino were our rookies for last year, and they have been more towards our carry style. Of course, Aino was playing a load of Tryndamere and GP. Kanatsu, always been a big Camille player, always been a big Gnar player too, and of course, that helps him secure that 1v1. And now what's interesting to me now is the Hawks see this bot side focus in terms of this 2v2 being so powerful early on, and they're starting to ban away some of Yu-Gi-Oh's bigger champions that can impact the game early on in that Galio. And the Zoe is a little bit different, but still wants to be heading towards bot side at some point.
Alright, and now last ban for V3. Do you keep hitting the support champion pool? Do you keep trying to make sure you can set yourself up to get that Kalista ahead as much as you can? Or are they going to try and hit Dasher in the mid lane? They're going to get rid of the Victor.
He's played that a couple of times, of course. Dasher been known to play that pick and a great many others on the Hawks tenure. Yeah, I mean, Dasher has forever really been the role player for this team, playing whatever the team needs of him, whether that is the Akali super carry. Something like the LeBlanc last year was a big champion for him too, but he's been big on his mages when the team has needed him. He has typically, though, of course, this split, been going towards more stuff like a Lissandra, more setup champions to help twin up with Blank. I feel like when Hawks have been at their best, it has been when Blank and Dasher have been on the same page with champions which have those go buttons, and they're hiding Dasher for that last pick because the Rel has been locked in alongside the Aphelios. This is a Reiner classic in its own right. A lot of storied players on the Hawks. We've talked about Blank, talked about Dasher, Kanatsu. Let's make our way down to that bot lane because Reiner's Rel has been ban-worthy, even though in this matchup, I think it's going to have a hard time.
Yeah, he's been able to pull up engages out of nowhere in so many games in the past, and you have to respect this pick. As you said, even though it might not necessarily be the strongest one in the lane, definitely one that V3 will need to be wary of. As they go for the Sejuani, Washidai will be put on a weak side up in this top lane, provide some extra engage. Now mid lane, they're gonna go for it's a Corki lock-in.
Okay, so again, it does feel like V3 have said, these solo lanes are going to be safe, they're going to be survivable, and then it's bot lane where we want to really put our resources into. And you know what? Earlier in the week, a couple of us color casters for the LJL OU were having a bit of a chat about why does the LJL not play Sylas? Dasher was always a solid Sylas, even back on Unsold Stuff Gaming before the Hawks came in to replace their spot. Dasher was playing this champion. He's loved this champion in the past, but for some reason, as of recent games, hasn't wanted to pick it up. Now you have a Sejuani ult to steal, a Curse of the Sad Mummy to steal. You can even use your Fate's Call on someone like your Wukong to help them get into the fray if you steal the Kalista ult. I love this pick from Dasher, and while V3 have picked a lot of safe, scaling laners in their solo lanes, I think Dasher is going to have an absolute whale of a time in the early game.
Oh yeah, I don't think it gets even any worse in the late game because, as you said, so many ultimates to steal. He's just going to have a bit of a field day, and it feels to me like in the draft we have kind of drawn the battle lines. It is a top side, bot side split, with mid lane favoring the side of Hawks, which means V3, you gave yourself one shot in this draft. You have to get dress code ahead.
Yes, I completely agree. That's the take I have as well. You have one angle in the early game. That is Wrecking Ball Callista. It's something that we've seen a lot of teams do. Actually, in the ERLs, it's been a very popular thing, but we've seen it, of course, across some of our major regions too. And with Lee Sin potentially heading down that early dress code, Hatzal and Unica, that is where I am looking for V3. Get something going in that 2v2, particularly at that level 1. Someone like an Aphelios cannot fight against these champions. If that doesn't get enough, though, I'm looking at this mid-jungle from the Hawks, where they have typically found their successes. They have champions that can go in. They have champions that can carry, and that is warning signs already coming out of the draft from V3. And that's not even the end of it, because there are a lot of comfort champions on the side of Hawks, which they have always managed to succeed on. Lots to be afraid of here from V3.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like the fact that they're decisive, but you said, Hawks themselves, they'll be happy with the draft. And so far this split, the successes of Hawks came when Blank and Dasher are on the same page. Well, I would sure hope they are with a Wukong and a Silas. Throwing Rhina into the mix, and this looks like a comp that once you are getting into those mid-late game fights, and Dresco doesn't have like a 2,000 gold lead over Marble,
Gets tough,
I am not. Yeah, I'm not giving V3 too much of a chance. Like, that's the 49 out of 50.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the roles that everyone has to play within this team, because within both teams, I suppose. You know, we've already talked about what can happen with the Hawks, but basically there comes a point in the game where you're sat there as dress code, and even though you have Washidai on someone who's big and beefy in front of you, that Rel is probably going to get onto you. That Wukong is probably going to get onto you, especially if they're helped by that Silas. Speaking of the Silas, they've got their own inroads. Nah, similar. Literally every champion, including the Aphelios Moonlight Vigil, is going to have ways to reach you. Callista hates those kinds of scenarios. It really is, again, doubling down on that Callista lead and what V3 can do with it. Again, just resetting the stakes and the context, V3 actually have had some solid early games before. That's the one area of the game, even though they have been winless this year, which we have really praised them for. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. Now, I'm going to quickly go on to another point, too. I know, I like talking sometimes, and because I've not had much chance to talk. It's because I haven't had much chance to talk in this first round robin. Of course, my first game back on the LJL OU. Little baby project of mine that it is, alongside the other founders. I'd love to chat about Unica and Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually, because last year they made their way into the LJL, and they found themselves debuting onto some different rosters. Both of these players have found their way up to the LJL before, and when they were in the LJL, what I would say is that they were on comfort or on easy champions to pilot within their roles in the game. When Unica was coming into V3 to replace Muujin last year in terms of subbing in, he was playing stuff like Diana. You know what Diana does? Full clears. Doesn't have to do much until those team fights. Level 1 happening this bot side, not actually going to lead to too much. It seems like the Hawks are managing to survive so far. And Yu-Gi-Oh! In his own right was playing stuff like some of his real comfort champions, which meant that these players were allowed to kind of have their easy way into the LJL. They were eased into it. Now they have such a big responsibility for their team, and in a game like this, it is very difficult, as we were saying, to play out these kind of team comps against the Hawks.
Yeah, and we'll see how it does go on. You do just want to touch on one of the rune choices, of course, First Strike. We'll see if Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be able to get some effectiveness out of it, playing into a melee matchup, something worth pointing out anyways.
It's been the typical rune for Corki. It just means that when you hit your 2 items, you hit a rocket on someone, the extra % damage and extra gold coming across really, really hurts. Particularly with First Strike, it's not as early game focused as something like Kleptomancy used to be, which is what the rune is often related to. It actually ends up speeding you from your first and second item onwards, really, because that's when you do significant damage to actually get value out of that rune and start trading very heavily. Remember when Talon would take that rune in the jungle? He'd just end up like trading 80% of your HP and getting like 400, 500 gold out of it. That's kind of what Corki wants to do with the big one rockets too. It's obviously gives you access to the inspiration tree, but it also just helps you get on the board and accelerate when you're already into the game.
Alright, Unica pathing towards the bot side right now. You can see Yu-Gi-Oh! Already leaving the mid lane. Unfortunately for V3, Drescode and Hetel are pushing it quite deep, so I don't think there is any angle to dive or otherwise kill
Actually,
Marble.
Reiner and Marble have done a very good job here because as we said, you can't really fight Kalista or Mumu level 1, even though Rel has a fairly strong level 1 as far as things go, particularly when you are against champions that can't cancel your crash down. Aphelios isn't a champion until you get level 2 and you get access to your double switch abilities, where you kind of, level 1 you're switching between weapons, but neither of them have an ability. You get 2 of them at level 2, isn't that fun? But so they've managed to survive that, hold the wave outside of their towers, survive that very telegraphed early gank, because Unica has to be bot side. This is where their win condition is. And the Hawks, in a very intelligent way, have denied V3 one of their first entrances into this game.
Okay, you know, for a second I mind blanked and I thought that Blank was the top laner for some reason. Never mind, screw that. That was a moment where I was like, what is going on? But I completely agree with you. There is nothing that V3 were really able to do, and now as the first rotation of junglers is concluded and the first recalls happen, it is Blank on the bot side. So for the next minute or so, V3 still are without that angle, and as we both identified, it's the only thing they can do.
It's the real place where you're looking for, because, like, I'm looking at the top side, I'm like, yeah, you don't have a flash on Citroni, the Ignite helps, but, you know, closing down Kanatsu is not going to be very easy. See that Dasher already trading hard in that mid lane, and again, it is such a delight to see Dasher back on these playmaking, diving assassins. Loved watching his Akali and his LeBlanc in years past, and Dasher... Actually, you know what? Let's go on a bit of a longer point about this, because it looks like junglers are not close to their lanes right now. We've got a bit of time to work things out as resets come through. Dasher, this year, was meant to be our best mid laner. I'm just going to say that straight out, because Arya left, and we had this void at the top thinking Dasher was our second best mid laner. And then poor Dasher has to deal with Yaharong and Jet coming in. Of course, Dasher sees this mid 2v2 coming up, and he's not really had a chance to flex his muscles at the top of the table. He's had to kind of sit there and be, again, in this second rung of mid laners in the LJL. As much as he is a very talented player, seems like what it means to be an LJL mid laner this year in particular has taken an extra step upwards with the addition of other players. But Dasher, even with that, continuing to be consistent, if not the star player, which he was and potentially is past.
Yeah, now given yet another opportunity to really show that. I mean, I will reiterate again a point that I touched on earlier. Hawks have looked great when it was Dasher together with Blank on the same page, but, you know, that requires both of them, and in particular, Dasher to be stepping it up. And, I mean, just a little play that happened there, getting Reiner to come into the mid lane, gain the priority, and Hawks are, despite having a bot lane that's playing all the way under their turret, they have control over the river.
They do, and this is what it means to be a higher level team in a competitive sense. Now, V3, they have solid players. We saw what they did to the academy scene, and we've seen what they can do in various early games. But the Hawks are just better at rotating. Well, not just rotating, but resetting. They've ended up getting back into this bot lane. They have a wave stacked up, so they can crash that into the enemy turret, not held in this weird purgatory between the two towers when Dresscode and Hetzel can freeze it maybe themselves and run them down in the elongated lane. While they're doing this, Blank was on the bot side. They know that they're safe, and the Hawks bot lane have, just in a very intelligent way, they've managed to reset, hold the lane where they wanted to, and V3 just aren't on the same level as them in regards to what they can do with their minions.
Well, that translates into you start seeing those CS advantages creep up across the map, most notably in bot lane, the last place where we would expect Hawks to have an advantage, as Hetel goes for the bandage toss and is severely punished for it.
Yeah, what happened there was Hetel goes for the bandage toss. Thing is, Reiner ends up channeling that crash down and drags him backwards, CCing with the Glacial at the same time. Actually, Reiner playing that really well. Drags them back into Aphelios' active range. Kalista not in range to really follow up on that one either. So a quick trade ends up being a little bit dangerous there for Hetel. Loses a lot of HP and has to burn through their pot, so at least they're going to be ready for another all-in should it happen. But again, Reiner showing mastery of what has come to be one of his most favored champions, especially since its release.
Alright, Unica gonna be looking for the top lane. Let's see how that one turns out. Kanatsu immediately burns the flash. We still have the Glacial Prison. That is going to connect. The Ignite comes down. We still have the Dragon's Rage. First blood picked up by Unica.
Kanatsu a little too far forward, doesn't have vision in topside, and doesn't get the double hop. Both ultimates used from Unica and Washedeye. Unica not even needing to use that flash, though. But V3, it's a little late into the game, should I say. And I know it's only 8 minutes in, but they need to get these early advantages. It's a little late in, but they get something on the board. Sadly, it's not on the area of the map we were asking for them for it. As much as Dresscode at this point, going to be able to get some advantages back because they know that the top lane is kind of the area of focus for the Hawks right now as they take that Herald. But again, V3 at least on the board.
It's at least something, but it's what we've seen from them so many times before. Unica tends to find those early ganks, and this is nothing really new to us. I mean, Kanatsu overextending here, maybe not respecting the lack of vision and getting caught
Just
out.
doesn't get the double hop. Doesn't get the double hop. Means that he has to flash away a lot earlier than maybe he had wanted to. If you hold on to that flash a little longer, maybe you can dodge out on the Glacial Prison. That doesn't end up landing, but the way it ends up is a kill going over to Unica. Sadly, not more gold into Washidai's pocket. You can see that at least plates haven't fallen on that top side. Kanatsu getting his own individual advantages. Just a quick slip up there to reduce some of that effect.
First Dragon now being picked up. Good to see. Actually, the bot lane being used for something. Now, Hetel ticked over to level 6 quite recently. Curse of the Submummy is up and available. If there was ever a time where you can just brute force and engage, it's gotta be now.
Well, you say that. I'm looking at two other players moving their way down bot side because Varble sat under his turret, but jungle and support, they are there. Jungle support, of course, so important in the competitive level, and Blank has been there to cover the Hawks bot lane. So, if Tel does want to go in, it's probably going to have to be at the cost of the Kalista ultimate to keep them safe. And again, Blank has that Herald, knows that probably the play would come down in that bot side. Nowhere else on the map is seeming like a big option for them right now. And V3 are losing out right now because nothing's happening. This is a win for the Hawks because nothing really has registered for V3.
They just got that one kill, and that's it. Iron Spike Whip, I guess, for Unica, but that is not the returns that you are looking
wow,
for.
what an item completion.
Yeah,
That's gonna win the next fight.
Man.
I mean,
the AoE damage.
I mean, very different team, but Megamin on Axes was a big Iron Spike Whip user. He used that to on his mid lane champions. Speaking of that mid lane, Dasher just again giving some love taps in that. Pushing Yu-Gi-Oh! Under turret. It's going to be gold to that Silas, and that is a scary fact. You are fighting a Megadar here, folks!
Yeah, I don't know what they are thinking is going to happen, but Kanatsu is just going to hop away to safety, going down into the mini burst of movement speed to literally just walk away. And in the meantime, 2 plays picked up in the mid lane by the Hawks.
But he was just about to go mini. Why not wait until that point? Kanatsu manages to use that Gnar to buy enough space, of course, with Blank and Dasher getting control over mid lane. It's not like Yu-Gi-Oh! Could really respond. The Hawks, again, just in a more safe position. And at that point, that one feels like a bit of an overforce. And again, it's not in the area of the map that V3 really want to be playing around. It feels a little bit... Okay, I'm not going to quite call it desperation, but it's already starting to run out of a couple of their more bright ideas.
Finally, Unica is pathing towards the bot side. But I agree, we have seen them stand around this top for so long. And... Hell, you're on a ward, man. Oh no, Unica is also going to be spotted out. So I don't expect Marble and Rhino to be walking up anytime soon.
Ah, yes. The time-honored tradition of wasting the jungler's time. That's a fun one. Dasher taking such hard trades. And remember, actually, even stealing Courtyard like this, so much damage.
Ooh, Yu-Gi-Oh! Getting very close to the Hex Drinker, making sure he has some HP really to stay alive on bot. Yeah, Silas, once you manage to prog that Conqueror, I don't think you're winning any 1v1s there, Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, Hetel. Might need to use that Kalista ult, getting called up.
It is going to be used indeed, and just the ultimate, but it is a free cooldown that Hawks forced by, what, being...
There's a flash on Dasher. This could very much be a kill. No Hex Drinker.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Okay, he's going to flash away. Not very necessary, but doesn't get tagged by the Abduct anyways. He's going to be saved. The thing is, and it's very obvious once we're watching this game, it's always Hawks that are pushing V3.
And that is, again, you look at these compositions, and it was just right out the potential storm that might be coming in the first 5 to 10 minutes. They've gone beyond that now. Hawks have managed to find their own way into this game, and Kanatsu even feeling bold enough to walk in and go into the topside juggle. The ult doesn't quite land from Washidai.
The insect is going to be used, but Kanatsu's got a flash of his own. Will he use it? Gets stunned by the Listen, the Grave's going to miss! Oh, thank God the flare from Washidai.
Oh,
saves the absolute disaster. But the Magnet Storm in the bot lane. Reiner finds the engage. Dresco is getting ran down by Marble. One more auto blank gonna hop in for the kill, and Hetel is going to compensate his life choices.
Oh, with each and every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, and Hawks use this law of physics in the law of cross-mapping from top to bot. They find themselves 2 kills on bot lane. And you know that win condition, you know that Wrecking Ball of Kalista, it has been snapped from the chain, it's not even gotten swinging. a while. There are a couple of kills towards the top 2v2 in terms of V3. It's not really getting you a win condition. It's feel good. It's a moment in the sun, but it is going to be quickly snuffed out when you're getting towards these fights and you have to match up 5v5 against what Hawks can do with their composition. And Kanatsu, he's having a bit of some happy... Okay, you know what? After further review, this was a normal Summoner's Rift experience, and it was not negative gaming from Kanatsu. He has himself such a close escape. He's waiting for his flash to come available, and I'm going to be honest here. If Dasher genuinely believed, I reckon that Kanatsu gets out alive.
Yeah, this was definitely way too close for comfort, and then the response in the bot lane. When you put Rel together with a Wukong, things happen. Alright, off screen, we have the Hexing Dragon and Victor. Yeah, and Dresco doesn't have any summoners. He is just dead. Hitel gonna walk? Gonna try to walk anyways. 2 more kills for Hawks, and they're happening in the bot lane. You know what, as a V3 fan and registered copium vendor, it just feels so bad. It's feeling so bad because whenever they've got a lane to play around, Unica just goes to the other side of the map. I'm like, you can play around Washidai, he goes bot lane. You can play around bot lane, he goes to Washidai. I don't know.
That is, you have to start asking questions, right? I mean, not that the questions haven't been asked already, and if you've seen spring, seen most of this summer as well in terms of the first round robin, those questions will continue to be asked. Dasher has a Reiner over the wall and is continuing to trade heavily. That Hex Trinket is back up and available from Yu-Gi-Oh, but you can see how much Dasher is willing to flex those muscles. And again, it is just really nice to see Dasher on an agency, high damage, high presence pick in that mid lane, because Dasher has forever actually been one of my favorite players in the LJL, even when he was struggling on the Hawks back in 2020 as a top laner in spring. This guy has continually tried to play to the best of his ability what his team needs him to be, and in this game, it has been a bit more of that playmaker, which is a welcome return for the player.
Absolutely, and we saw the gold take over there. Marble is huge. I'm just going to put it out there. 1-0 and 3, 30 CS ahead, has got the full tower to him. I don't remember if that was pre or post plates, but either way, dress code is not going to be able to match the damage. And in a role like AD carry, if you can't match your opponent's damage, well, you're in deep trouble.
Especially when you're a champion like Kalista, who basically stays alive by drain tanking through a lot of things and being able to shrug off the initial amount of damage. And also the other thing about Kalista is that Kalista becomes infinitely more dangerous when you have to dive onto her. At 0-2, you're probably okay to just take the frontline fight, because Kalista's not going to punish you for that. It's in a similar way to if you've played against Dravens or anything else like that, which becomes a real problem when they're ahead of the game, because they threaten to just kill you when you dive onto a different target. That's not going to be the case in this game. You look at dress code, and sadly, yet again, this player who came in to, of course, replace Marble, who is outgoing from V3, lest we forget, rather, what the heck happened with the off-season between V3 and Marble. Dress code hasn't really managed to fill the shoes that V3 wanted in that bot lane carry, and once again, they are struggling to put together what they need to do in this game. It's a little directionless now. They have themselves 2 dragons. That's definitely something going for them. They find something onto Blank, but I'm not sure this is the fight you want.
L is gonna drop the ultimate, they're going to commit anyways, but the Magnet Storm coming in from Reiner, playing the distraction, but Dresco picks up the kill. The problem is, V3 are trading all of their health bars, and as you mentioned, Dasher is on the teleport behind the rest of the team. Now, could be in a potential 1v5, so he is just going to nope out of this one. V3, they're gonna get a kill.
They get a kill, but they are losing a lot in bot side. They're losing side waves while this is happening. If they get mid out of turret, this is a significant win. If it stays at just the 1 kill, not as great for them. Charge is coming in, and that's the ult in return from Dasher.
Yeah, Dresco getting slowed down. The turret so incredibly low. It is going to stay alive.
My gosh.
Hawks managed to defend, and V3 will be leaving very, very unhappy.
And because now you've used that Herald, that's the second Herald, you're not going to get another one of them. You have to ask yourself, when do you get to return towards mid lane? You've parked that Aphelios there. Aphelios is, of course, not really under as much threat, given that this Kalista isn't as threatening in themselves. I think the Hawks, by not losing that tower there, have come away with, again, quite a niche big victory. Rhino does give up their life for this. You maybe have to wonder whether that teleport could have come in a little earlier from Dasher. Of course, Dasher has a crown, and most of the time that's not great in a lot of these fights into something that ranges you like a Corki. But if you come into that fight with a crown, you get to just smash through the first couple of seconds while you got that damage buff, debuff on. That could have been such a huge flank, and the Hawks barely miss out on managing to get the best case scenario from that fight. Again, this is probably why Hawks aren't one of our top teams. They are there, kind of playing that gatekeeper between the top 2 to 3 and the rest of the table, but again, they're not as clean as they could be. That's the next step we need to see from them and see if they have another opportunity later into this game, show us a bit more of that clean engage.
The Baron is going to be up in a minute, another Dragon in 15 seconds, so we'll have plenty of opportunities to see their objective setups, to see their macro game, and how they just go about expanding the lead that they already got against the V3.
So, minute until that Baron comes up. Dragon is up now. Importantly, Hawks have themselves control of that bot lane. Mid lane is more contested, sure, and V3 have access to the river. They've got that big choke point. They have first crack at that area of the map. But if Dasher gets to push in bot lane, they can get flanked, and they don't have the best flanking vision right now. Dasher is clearing it out, and if it does come to V3 wanting to get up to Soul Point, which would be a big turning point for them, you have to consider the fact that they might be in very big danger from, as we said, that flank which Hawks couldn't quite pull off the last time.
Hey, we've got the package, Yu-Gi-Oh's got the teleport, and the Dragon is being set up. Hawks right now in the position, but they will...
Teleporting in.
Dasher is on a flank angle, going to be spotted out by that controller. The Dragon is down to 4,000 health, going down to 2,000. It's going to be going down. It's secured by Blank. Dash is still on the flank, not looking to go in. Kanatsu is mega. He's got access to the flash, but the V3 orderly disengage for the time being, just walking it out. They gave up the Dragon. Sometime in the middle, the tower fell, but yeah, it's a Drake for a tower.
Yeah. In the tug of war, V3 get themselves that out of turret. Remember, there is still a package here from Yu-Gi-Oh just remaining, but he's only got one rocket to follow up with follow-up DPS. Dasher has the Amoon Wall, has Flash, maybe looking.
Rhino's on that flank as well. This is potentially big. Magnus
there we go.
2 members, and the combo being laid down by Dasher. V3, they just don't have enough damage to lay down onto the Hawks. Fate's Call gonna be used to save Hetel. 1 kill. Picked up by Hawks, 2 kills as Kanatsu finds the boomerang.
So with 2 kills and the jungler dead, Hawks maybe have an angle to go towards Baron. Actually, with the low death timers and not the best weapons on the Aphelios, I don't think they feel like they have the DPS to start that up. But honestly, again, I feel like V3, most of that fight was going okay for them. They could stomach it, because if you lose the Dragon but you get that mid out of turret, that's kind of okay. But then they give up that first kill and the big end of that fight after that point, and this is where things, again, feels like V3 overstayed. You actually have a decent win at this point. V3 potentially looking to split that fight up, collapse on one side of things, but doesn't really end up that way. The only reason this doesn't go as bad as it does is because, again, you got that Kalista ultimate, and Hetel kind of plays rearguard action, gets to be Fates called out of the fray. And Kanatsu at least manages to get that right at the very end. But again, it feels like V3, we're kind of used to them losing so much that it feels like, you know, oh, do we have to dunk on this for XYZ fights? That could have still got a lot worse. It's just, what are you going to do with this stalled time at this point? It's not that the game's over right now. You are at some point going to have a Corki that's relevant, but when does that become something you start playing around?
Only 1 item on Yu-Gi-Oh, so going to be at least a couple of minutes, and Unica is going to be falling off. I mean, at some point it is just an insect bot. But the bigger problem is dress code. Is he ever going to be relevant in those team fights in this game?
You know, this reminds me. Well, okay. It can be in the right situation, because if you end up playing around these tricky flank angles, as, again, we like to call them here on the broadcast, or at least I do, the flangle. If you have someone like Dasher, who is trying to play on the flank, try and play things a bit tricksy, and then gets hit by that Kalista, we can see something very similar to one of our games between Rascal Jester and DFM from spring, where Rascal Jester was so far behind, and then DFM managed... Oh, no, sorry, actually, it wasn't even last split. It would have been last year. Heck, they've played so many times in this magnificent rivalry that I end up losing. I'm getting old, I tell you. But you can definitely see players who are very proficient and teams that are very proficient at pulling off picks with the Callista, being able to punish some of these flanks. So we'll have to see if Dasher goes for that again. We've talked a lot about Hawks going for those flanks. They're going for a big top lane play, big power play for them. What can they do with it?
The kick is going to get blank away, though I believe that was just the clone, and the Magnet Storm is keeping Yu-Gi-Oh in place. Comes coming in with the Glacial Prison, but the cavalry has arrived, and Marble will lay down the damage. Dasher takes 1 kill as well. 3-4-0, Hawks take the tower. They're going to turn towards the Baron.
And V3, they pile onto that fight topside, knowing they aren't going to have their AD carry there. We talked about that Callista. You were talking about, you know, when is Dresco going to be a factor? We were just talking about how it can do when you are in charge of the picks, when you manage to find someone away from the fight. They commit to that big fight. They don't even have that Callista there, and this is going to be the mistake which breaks this game. V3, not like it was unlikely for them to lose this game, given their record on paper and what they've been showing us recently. But this is a bit of a sad situation for them yet again. It felt like they'd stalled out, felt like they could have held on a little longer. But one bad commitment to a fight in this one, it feels like that story starts going away from them. Again, just look at this. Your Callista's in mid lane. You know you aren't getting to this fight, and yet they commit. You could have pulled out of this. Could have maybe just given up Yu-Gi-Oh around this topside turret and go, well, you know, it's whatever. It is what it is. We managed to keep everyone alive. Because the Corki goes down alongside the jungler, alongside that everyone else really, and that Amumu going in, you give up the Baron, you probably give up the game with it.
It's tough to imagine how V3 claw their way back into this one, especially now that those inner towers, they're all still standing. So if, or rather when, Hawks will be able to knock them down, that is even more gold being funneled into the rest of the team, and we're already staring at, what, 6,000, 7,000?
A lot of money in the bank.
Yeah,
a lot of money in the bank. Yeah, it's just about a 7,500 gold lead once that inner turret goes down. Rhino's not content to sit at that.
He just went, what, like 2... Okay, just a flash here, but I was still like, nice. Engage, and Dasher comes in with the hijack. The Moonwall picks everyone on the V3 to stay in place and just die, quite frankly, because Hawks are going into the base. They're going for Dresco. Dasher takes him down, and Washudai, he is the last one standing under the Nexus tower as they go. And this is cyberbullying from Hawks. They're going to get a clean ace.
And the Hawks, what do we say right from the draft? We said V3 had to be worried because the Hawks had a mid-jungle that could go, that could link up, that could connect and break down what V3 wanted to do in these 5v5s. Dasher, blank, not for the first time this game, but for the last, crush through the engage, and this will be taking the game with it.
You have to imagine the first Nexus Star falls, V3 will put up a bit of fight kick coming in from Unica, but it is a bit too little. It is a bit too late. Second Nexus Star is gonna fall. Alright, the package from Yu-Gi-Oh means that we will get one more fight, Nightmare. Let's see if V3 can get anything turned up.
Okay, misjudged it slightly. A lot of shenanigans happened under that tower, and stopwatches were used to keep the Hawks deathless in that part of it. But again, Reiner on the rel, talked about that mid-jungle, got to shout out Reiner again. Turns out actually a lot of the Hawks are playing well this game. Who would have thunk it? But Reiner on that rel, meeting their targets and allowing the mid-jungle to play around a lot less defensive abilities from V3. All of their escapes were used, and then they pile on with that Wukong and the Silas, who once again stole that Amumu ult. And V3, they just cannot hold their battle lines at this point. It feels like that amount of gold, that Baron buff they've given over, that stops them. It robs them of the ability to stall out the game, which maybe they could have done if they hadn't made that big, huge mistake around that top lane outer turret.
You know the game's bad when Kanatsu's going Zonia's on an R.
Oh my god. I mean, I actually hadn't noticed that. I had completely not noticed that. I mean, wants to go in stasis a little bit longer. I think your hyperproc scales off of AP. I mean, I'm not going to justify this. This is fun. You get to go golden, and the Hawks looking for the gold medal in this two-horse race between these teams. Nexus is open. Unica has a flash. What can you do with it?
He is getting stunned and dies. That is it. That's V3 with the last fight. Hetel gonna drop down the Curse of the Sad Mummy, but it doesn't really do a whole lot. Marble free hitting in the backside, and it's a wash. It's a formality from the Hawks as they will take the win from the V3. 4-3 in the first round robin. Hawks off to a good start this split.
And, you know, I think back to their last split, And coming out of that first round robin, they were 1-6 in their first round robin in spring. What a glow up it's been just between those two. Of course, they'll have to keep on building from that. But this was a team that ended up finishing just into those playoffs brackets. They had some struggles in spring, but at least they managed to make it there at that end of it. But this time around, again, pushing things further, developing a little more, becoming more coherent. Yes, it's a lot of comfort. They're starting to figure out their roles within their teams, and maybe they're going to get punished for that in a best of 5 setting. But for now, in these best of 1s, it is hard to deny the Hawks are looking like a 4th, maybe even 3rd place team.
It is starting to look great, but I believe we will have JWill join us soon, so we'll see you in the show after a short break.
And that is it. Round robin 1 done. 2 more left in the summer split.
Let's
That's
go.
how it is. We're already 1 down, 7 games, 7 days done. Everyone's played 7 days. We've got the final standings coming up. But let's get into this game. V3 versus the Hawks. Obviously, you guys, you said it a while ago on the cast. Yeah, V3. Yeah, V3. Yeah. But it is what it is. V3 there, you guys said they had a lot of things that they had to meet during this game, and they weren't really able to put the pressure where they needed to. We can take from the negative point first, I guess. What did V3 not do that they could have maybe done that would have ensured success?
So I think they had to really leverage their level 1 as a bot lane. I think there is a certain burden on a 2v2 for a Kalista to meet. Sam always had this great saying about some teams going internationally. You must be this high to ride the mechanical roller coaster. And with something like Kalista, I was chatting to a couple of coaches actually towards the start of this year and saying there actually aren't that many Kalista players anymore around. They need to train themselves back up because if you're not a one trick, this champion is just really hard to pilot. I think that V3 in the 2v2 didn't achieve enough, and they ended up flubbing their wave management at the same time to allow Marble and Reiner to get themselves into a safe position where they survived past that early level 1, didn't take any bad trades at that point, and they rode out that storm.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, obviously, Hawks just doing what they had to do. As you kind of said, they were just able to keep that bot lane away, but the mid jungle, I feel like really popped off for the Hawks in this game.
It definitely did. Dasher continuously pressuring UGO, not really allowing any mid lane support to come towards that bot lane, even potentially. And Blank, he was wherever he needed to be quite honest. Counter ganks, he got it, when Unica went towards the top lane. We saw that dive come through, and then throughout the game, just being there with the Cyclones for the engage. And yeah, very impressed with the jungle 2v2 from Hogs this game. They were on the same page, they played it cleanly, and that is what we needed to see from Hogs. Well, what we continue needing to see from them.
Yeah, and we're starting to get this building picture of the Hawks now in terms of when the Hawks look good, they have a good mid jungle. They have ways to go in bigger team fights, but also they have ways for Dasher to start controlling his own lane too. So I'm starting to wonder after this point whether when you're up against those Hawks, you want to start removing, again, some of the more proactive jungle picks. Maybe you have to get rid of that Wukong. Wukong has been a very safe blind pick, especially in the LJL. We don't have a lot of junglers which will punish specific jungle matchups, particularly something like a Wukong. I wonder if we get close towards playoffs and you have your Sengokus and your DFMs thinking about how to deal with a team like this, should they come through the lower bracket, I wonder if that will be their undoing and whether that's the next thing which the Hawks need to start broadening out. How many picks can you actually do this on? We've seen you Wukong, we've seen you Lysandra, and now we've seen the Silas. What else outside of that can keep you on this trend? Because if you can keep at this, you're very strong. If that gets denied from you, I'm worried.
Yeah, indeed. The side is looking pretty strong. Also, shout out to Reiner, back on the rail as well. Has been a little bit of time, but obviously performing once again pretty well, blocking the lead, staying in those latest team fights, stopping them getting any of those kicks off. And I think all in all, Hawks is proving once again that they are really a team that can hit those top contentions. They can get to that top 4, and they are definitely beating out all of the teams that should theoretically be lower than them. But it's whether or not they can start to crack that top 3, I think is the next big question for them. With these performances after the first round robin, Namera, would you say that you feel maybe confident that they could maybe take that top 3, or are you still putting them solidly as 4th?
Well, you're effectively putting them directly up against Rascal Jester, Burning Core, your other kind of 3-win-ish teams. Some like CJ obviously kind of in there, but I just can't trust that team. I'm so sorry, yep. I just can't. But I look towards that top 3 spot, and because Rascal Jester have faltered in their own ways, it's more open than I would have thought. I actually think in spring, the LGL's top 3 teams in DFM, in Sengoku, and Rascal Jester were the highest level that the LGL has seen as a region ever. I think we had an incredibly strong top 3. Rascal Jester have fallen from grace, and that leaves that unexpected opening. Right now, it feels like to me, the Hawks have a better grasp of what they need to do to win than some of our other teams in that bracket. Already talked about how to clear their identity of mid-jungle is, and then that's been a good rock for them. I think right now, I would put them in that 3rd spot, he says, not wanting to eat the Razor Cake and have Hawks let them down with expectations again. But after first round robin, yeah, I think it's hard to argue against that, because Rascal Jesters, as their prime competition, is who we assume to be in that 3rd spot, haven't done the same. They don't really know what's getting their engines running right now.
Yeah, and then Kashka, obviously you said you found some new Hopium today, some new Copium. Is that still running high for you? Haven't V3 shown enough in this first round robin for you to be actually, round robin 2, round robin 3, there is still potential for them to start picking up some wins, they are slowly improving, or are you still a little bit unsure about their fate?
You see, I'm unsure, because on the one side, it's very difficult to lose 42 games in a year.
Oh my god.
But then on the other side, it's we've seen good elements from them sometimes, but we haven't seen them work together, I believe, this year at all. And Nightmare had a good point. Where do you go next with this team? What is the next step in what you're trying to do? You have tried to play through, I believe, every lane at this point, and just never really sticks.
And there was a point that I brought up in cast, which was when Yu-Gi-Oh! And Unica looked good when they subbed into the LGL, when they were making these kind of appearances and they're kind of going onto the main stage as rookies, a lot of the time, their teams would make their jobs easy. You can't do that for everyone on V3. Someone has to have a hard job. That's the nature of League of Legends. It is not an easy game. It is a team game. Someone has to do the stunt work, right? You can't have a stunt double for absolutely everyone. Maybe you can get away with just one person playing out of their mind, but no one is playing at that level right now. You don't get to shove Unica onto a Diana and have Yu-Gi-Oh! Onto a very stable mid laner which doesn't have to impact the map. You need them having to impact them. I'm primarily looking towards those two as players which have done that in the LGL before. Washadai actually in spring had some okay moments, but what are you going to do now? Top lane is an island meta. They don't end up ganking bot lane early. You can't TP bot as a top laner from that point. I'm really worried for V3 because the roadmap for them from this point is really difficult. Who is actually going to be standing up and saying, this is the role which the team needs me to play?
We'll have to find out. Obviously, still a lot of games left to be played. We still have 2 round robins to go through, which will be commencing on Sunday. But today's games, let's have a quick roundup of what you guys missed if you didn't watch from the start of the stream. So CJ versus Axis, it was a pretty nice early game map. I think that CJ really did look pretty strong. Axis not showing up as greatly as we would have liked to see, but still putting in a little bit of a fight there. But CGA coming out ultimately as the winners. Sengoku versus Binding Core went as people would have expected. Sengoku just looking very, very strong, very consistent every single game, and again picking up another win. And then on the flip side, Rascal Jesters versus DFM. A little bit of a better showing, I would say, from Rascal Jesters. Some could argue. I think that they showed some prowess. They showed
Secret had some good hooks. I enjoyed Secret's performance on the Nautilus.
But DFM looking very consistent overall, really just showing exactly why they are the contender to Sengoku, and then obviously V3 versus Hawks we just went through. So that has been the roundup for day 7, and before we go, let's play Mess or Impress. We're going to start with the messes as always to get the negative out of the way, and then we finish on the high note. So I'm going to ask you guys, I'll go Kashka, Nymera, then myself. Kashka, who was your mess for today?
Ooh, okay. I don't want to dunk too much on this one. I think it's very game specific, but Hachimecha for me on that Bel'Veth just hasn't really found the just didn't click. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to the draft, but either way, just didn't see a lot from the pick, and that's definitely my mess.
So, you know what? I'm going to comment on this a little bit. I will have a different mess because I think it's funny. But particularly with Hachimecha, he has been... If there has been a jungler in the LJL that's going to pull out weird shit and just pick out something, it's going to be Hachimecha. His most played is stuff like Skarner. He played that when it was meta. He's played it while it's out of meta. He is a Kayn player. He's played that just randomly off the bat. He'll play Trundle out of meta. He plays a lot of different stuff, and a lot of it does air towards power farming and then having some point of power in the mid game. Bel'Veth fits that. I just wonder if you're going to pick Bel'Veth specifically in that game, actually, why didn't you play Kayn? Kayn just feels like a better Bel'Veth in that kind of composition where Bel'Veth can get shut down very, very easily. But if you're going to have that, why not have a transformy form which happens eventually rather than relying on getting kills, which he didn't get that game?
Yeah, so who was your actual mess? You said you
My actual mess, I would like to... actually, I'd like to innovate on this because it was a mess, but it was an impressive mess. Crest Gaming Act! Stop! Why are you this far ahead in games and giving over Elder and having to backdoor? Like, you confuse me, you frighten me, and I want to go home. Crest Gaming Act, you are an absolute mess. I love you, but stop.
Yeah, that is completely fair. My mess for today is actually Axis over aggression. I think that it's kind of costing them a lot of leads, especially in the early game. And I want to see if they can maybe like chill out a little bit, and maybe they'll have a bit more of a better time against some of these other teams. But moving on to the lighter note, on to the impresses. Kashka, who really impressed you today?
I have a feeling I might be stealing Nymera's one here, but I am going to go with with Dasher in that last game, because just working together with Rhina, with Blank, finding the engages, especially the Curse of the Sad Mummies, hijack them, just go in, destroy V3, and has played the mid lane matchup as well, continuous pressure onto UGO, and did everything the team required him to do.
So actually, you know what? I wasn't going to go with Dasher. Now, Dasher had a great return to what we know that he can do. And I love Dasher on, again, these high mobility diving champions with big amounts of damage like, LeBlanc, Akali, Silas. It's great to see that again today. But you know who I'm going to give my impress to? It's because they're doing something which I haven't seen from them in a while, and they're breaking their own kind of conventions, is Once on Sengoku. Once, from last year, and for most of his tenure in the LJL, has been Lee Sin, Jarvan, Graves. It's been... Hey, I'm just pondering my orb, my morb over here. Yeah, just pay no attention to what's happening on my screen. But particularly with Once, I look at this player as someone who was always the hyper-aggressive early player and would flip it within the first 5 to 10 minutes. Playing Zac, playing something which actually has to be a bit more measured. After seeing what happened in spring as well, where he had at the start of that journey, particularly if you go back and watch Game 5 of Rascal Jester in their crazy semi-finals, Once was incredibly intelligent. And for a player that has forever been the early mechanical ganker, he's had a new discovery in a new direction. And it's great to see that. And now I think that's a big driving force in why Sengoku have been so dominant in the first round robin.
Yeah, indeed. And it's nice to see. You love to see some growth from players. It's always blessed to see players branch out into new picks and really perform on them. For me, my impress is actually going to be Nap, and he's been someone that's been impressing me all bit. But I think it's going to Nap. I think he played pretty well on the Gangplank. He had some great barrels, but also he ended the game, which saved CGA from potentially throwing.
Saved our sanity. Woo!
Yeah, so my impress is going to be to Nap. I think he's performing really well. And I think we talked about it going into that game. We want to see if Nap can carry, put him on a carry and see what actually he will do. And I think he did perform pretty well. But With that being said, that is the first round robin done. We are done now. We're
Woo,
1/3
let's
of the
go.
way through
Yeah.
this bit. 2 more left. And that will be continuing on Sunday. So make sure you tune in 10 a.m. BST on Sunday. I will not be there. It's going to be a new host. So make sure you come
Ooh.
through and show some support. But thank you very much from all of us that have casted today. Shout out to all of the casters. Shout out to production as well. Chris absolutely smurfing it.
I
as
finally
always.
made it!
And obviously, a big love from the LJL. But that's 1/3 down, 2/3 left to go. We'll see you on Sunday.